the outside, not reporting at all, not doing any journalism, it's hard to shake that feeling that, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, I have to say. I mean, it feels like we're escalating constantly, right? I mean, that these conflicts that earlier used to be contained have now spiraled and spilled over. And if we look at even, Israel and Palestine, and I don't want to obviously ask you for a quick take, but I do want to ask you if you see nuance in India's position, because I think there are people on all sides of this who sometimes look at a country like India and then just wonder why we're voting the way, vetoing the votes in the UN. India's always had to do this balancing act, for example. And I just saw this, this tweet you had retweeted of that Randir Jaiswal had put out that, we're still supporting sending humanitarian aid to Palestine, acutely aware that this, war is spiraling out. I think it's been called a genocide at this stage. So comments from you on India's balancing act, and if you see that evolving in terms of foreign policy, and also if you want to address my going to hell in a handbasket general vibe that we seem to be getting.
Well, the hell in a handbasket is because we've had close to 100 years or at least 75 years of relative peace since the world wars. And obviously, it's not been peace. There have been all kinds of conflicts around the world, but it's not been at the World War level. So if your bar is at World War I and World War II, then everything below that. And so, therefore, it seems as if things are going badly. Someone said to me, Amrita, once, and he was a former head of state, actually. He said to me, when I was growing up, I was always taught that, men behaved like men, and he didn't mean it in a gender-specific term, but men behave like men. They are emotional, they get angry, they want revenge, they have all these human emotions. But states always behave in a rational manner, which is for the best of their own countries, as well as for all of humanity. And his point was that we're in a period now where states are behaving like men, where states are emotional and getting into slanging matches and looking for revenge for things and hitting out in a way which is not in the best interests of anyone, but having to do that in a certain sense. So I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of countries behaving very, very badly, to put it very mildly. And as a result, what we're seeing, whether it's the accusations of genocide in Gaza or whether it is the invasion of Ukraine, that has led to many questions about the entire international rule of law and the order. I think we're in uncharted territory. One of the reasons is because it's been 75 years, and the hold and the kind of commitments every country made to universal human rights, to non-aggression pacts and all the rest has kind of watered away a little, and everybody's looking once more towards their own interests. The second is this very tribal nature of foreign policy that seems to be emerging, which is that every country has to pick a side. It doesn't matter which side you pick, but you have to pick a side. And I think India, because of its non-alignment roots, because of the way strategic autonomy has been built as a concept here, stood up at the beginning of the Ukraine war and said, listen, we don't really want to pick a side. It's hurting us that there is a conflict. And can you please take a look at that too? And there were enough other people who had the same idea. So you talk about the global South coming together, and India trying to channel that idea. When it comes to the Israel-Gaza situation, I think our position is a little more cloudy than it's ever been in the past. In the past, it had been very clear that India wanted good ties with Israel, and really bilateral ties depend on so many areas of defense, of technologies that Israel shares with us, even for things like agriculture and water, as well as the kind of employment in both countries that we see. So Israel and India have always wanted to have better ties, certainly since they actually built full diplomatic relations in 1992. But India has always had its sympathy for the Palestinian cause. And I think that's where it's become a little cloudy, because right at the beginning, after October 7th, it seemed as if the Indian government would only see the fact that there'd been a terror attack. And that's what all the statements were about. And as a result, what you're talking about, the UN resolutions where India abstained seems to be very surprising, because in the past India would never abstain on a resolution asking for Israel to cease fire, for example. Uh, then India pushed back and then shifted into a different kind of voting. But it's been back and forth for the last year. I think mainly because relations with Israel had become so much better, and relations with the US for that matter, that the government felt it needed to show some balance. Remember, Amrita, that when India is showing balance, it's essentially just abstaining from votes. It's not counting its vote as either side. And as you pointed out, continuing to send aid to Palestine. And I always point out that, look, there are nuances in this position. India has condemned the attacks of October 7th on Israel as a terror attack. And yet India has not designated Hamas as a terror organization, which is something the Israeli government has wanted India to do. India, has said Israel has a right to protect itself, and that, it should be a reasonable kind of response. At the same time, India has increased its aid to UNRWA, the UN agency that
Yeah.
deals with refugees there, the aid agency there, which Israel believes is part of Hamas almost. Israel has called them all kinds of names. So, in a sense, India has kept certain traditional positions and is kind of hedging on the others, which is why you're quite right. It has been a confused position. It has not been a crystal clear, consistent position on any of those. But I think somewhere there, what you're seeing is also the debates within about how much is too much, how much should you say. What happens, for example, when Israeli soldiers are targeting UN troops in UNIFIL in Lebanon, and India has, close to 900 of its own troops there. The Indian government began by not really wanting to condemn Israel, but has ended up issuing very strong condemnations of the attacks on the UNIFIL soldiers. So, as I said, there is some amount of confusion. You're absolutely right, and we're trying to see, maybe it's a policy that's still in the works.